Welcome to the Lion's Share podcast, where we break down today's most impactful research and bring fresh insights from the academic frontier straight to you.
Today we're cutting through the noise, really, tackling that sales problem everyone struggles with. What do you actually do with a salesperson who's consistently underperforming? You know, the laggard. So much of the research, the literature, it's flooded with stuff on motivating stars, bonuses, trips, commissions, you name it. But if you're leading a team, you know the stick can be just as important as the carrot, maybe more so sometimes.
That's exactly the tension, isn't it? I mean, threats, punishments, they're common out there in the field. But academically, there's been this pretty big gap in understanding what actually works when it comes to disincentives. So we're diving into a really interesting 2019 paper. It's by Boichuk, Bommaraju, Ahearne, and others called Managing Laggards, The Importance of a Deep Sales Bench. And they looked at a specific mechanism, one designed to put, very specific and visible pressure on those low performers.
Okay, so our mission today is basically to unpack how effective this thing was, how it worked, and maybe some of the surprising organizational risks that came with it. This intervention, they studied the bench program. Let's get into that.
Right, the bench program. The concept's pretty simple, but the execution sounds quite brutal, honestly. It's a credible threat made publicly. If you don't hit your quota and you finish last in your district, you're out, you're fired. But here's the novel part, the twist. The company actively reinforces that threat. They hire and visibly train replacements the bench while the program is running. So it stops being this abstract risk, it becomes immediate.
Tangible. That visibility piece sounds absolutely critical. Let's talk about how they tested it because, for our listeners who are deep in research, getting causality right here is paramount. They couldn't just do a perfect randomized trial out in the field, right? So they had to pull out some serious methodological tools. This was at a big company too, Fortune 500.
Skackley, a Fortune 500 cleaning supply company. And yeah, it was a quasi-experiment. They rolled out the program in some districts, but not others. That's your treatment and control. And the treatment districts knew. They knew this trained replacement was waiting in the wings. Now, because it wasn't random who got the program, the big challenge was making sure those groups' treatment and control looked identical before the program kicked off, statistically speaking.
Okay, so for people listening, maybe practitioners, maybe scholars not writing regressions every day, break down these complex methods. They use genetic match and differences, or DIDI. What did that actually let them do? What's the practical promise of using those?
Yeah, great question. Bottom line, it bought them causal inference, or as close as you can get in this setting. The genetic match basically used an algorithm to find the best possible comparison group, making sure the districts were balanced on, everything they could measure, past performance, network size, you name it. Then the diff and diff analysis let them isolate the change in performance that was just down to the bench program. It controls for general market trends or maybe other things the company was doing. So it wasn't just correlation. They were estimating the actual causal effect.
You're right, getting beyond correlation to causation. Yeah. That's what makes these findings really carry weight. So did it work? Did this pretty harsh approach actually move the needle overall?
It absolutely did. Immediately, and it was sustained. When they implemented the program, performance jumped. The definite estimate for the mapped sample showed a statistically significant increase of about 4.07%. And think about that for a huge company, a 4-point lift across the sales force. That's potentially millions in extra revenue.
4% is definitely significant. But, we often see incentive plans that mostly just juice the top performers, people already doing well. Did this program hit its target? Did it actually motivate the laggards at the bottom?
That, I think, is the most critical finding for anyone managing a sales team. The answer is a resounding yes, a positive effect. It was overwhelmingly concentrated among the lower performers. Get this, the salespeople who were in last place. They boosted their performance by a massive 9.45 percentage points, almost 10 points. Compare that to the folks in first place, they only saw about a 1.46 point bump. Pretty marginal.
Wow, okay. 9.45 versus 1.46. That's not just tweaking performance. That's fundamentally shifting the behavior of the chronically lowest performers. It seems like it really solved that problem of, how do you light a fire under the people who aren't responding to the usual stuff?
Exactly. And this finding connects directly to a key theory here, deterrence theory. Now, the classic literature on deterrence, people like Antia and colleagues, talks about three main things: the certainty of punishment, the severity, and the speed. Firing someone is obviously severe. Making it a public policy makes it feel more certain. And having that trained bench, that ensures speed. The replacement is ready.
Okay, certainty, severity, speed, makes sense. But this paper suggests there's something else going on, right? A fourth element that the bench program really leverages.
Yes. And this is a major contribution, vividness. They actually tested this idea in a follow-up lab experiment study, too. They compared the full bench program, the threat, plus the visible replacement against just a simple fire condition, which was only the threat. And guess what? Performance was significantly higher when that replacement was physically present. That vividness, that tangible presence, amplified the deterrent effect.
Ah, okay. So it's the difference between, like, hearing a rumor about layoffs versus seeing the new person who might take your job setting up their desk right next to you.
Precisely. It makes the threat visceral, immediate, hard to ignore. But, it gets more nuanced because not everyone reacted the same way, even to this vivid threat. The researchers found the effect was actually stronger for salespeople who had larger advice networks.
Wait, larger advice networks? You mean the people they go to for help with work stuff?
Exactly. The colleagues they rely on for guidance, tips, strategy.
Huh. Why would having more connections, like a better social safety net, make you respond more strongly to a threat? I might have guessed the opposite. Maybe isolated people feel more desperate.
It seems to be about capability under pressure. When that threat hits, you don't just need to work harder, you need to work smarter, too. That echoes some older research by Sujian. Salespeople with bigger networks, more social capital, could tap into better ideas. They could get advice on managing their territory, quick tactical fixes, things like that. The numbers bear it out. Those with larger networks saw their performance jump by 5.59 percentage points. Compare that to only 2.35 points for salespeople with smaller, more isolated networks. So the threat provides the push, but the network helps channel that energy effectively.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. The network gives them the how, but raises a big question about the long term. Was this big performance boost real change, or was it just, temporary, people doing just enough to avoid the axe?
The evidence points very strongly towards temporary, transactional, really. They looked at what happened after the company stopped the bench program, and the performance drop, it was immediate and significant. Performance fell by about 4.64 percentage points. Basically, it wiped out almost all the gains that the program had generated.
Wow, almost a perfect reversal. And I'm guessing, given what you said earlier, that drop was probably steepest for the laggards who had gained the most.
You got it. The decline was most pronounced among those low performers, which really reinforces this idea of compliance. It suggests the extra effort was driven purely by the threat being there, being vivid. It wasn't about them internalizing new skills or, fundamentally changing how they sell. Take away the threat, the extra effort disappears.
That immediate snapback definitely poses a challenge for managers thinking about this. And it leads to another critical issue. What happens if you do follow through? What happens to the people left behind, the survivors, when someone actually gets replaced? This paper talks about procedural justice here, right? And the risk if the person fired was, important to the team socially.
Exactly. This is crucial. They looked at the centrality of the salesperson who was let go. They measured it using in-degree centrality, basically. How many colleagues regularly sought that person out for advice? And firing someone, even if they technically met the criteria, Miss Quota came last, is really risky if that person was seen as helpful, central, well-regarded.
So even if the firing was fair, according to the program rules, the team might see it differently. They might perceive the process as unfair if a valuable colleague gets booted.
Precisely. The perception of fairness gets complicated, and the impact was dramatic. They found that if a district lost a salesperson who was highly central, a go-to person for advice, the negative fallout when the program eventually stopped was way worse for the survivors' performance. In those districts, survivors' performance dropped by roughly 12 percentage points. 12. Compare that to only about 5 points if the person fired was less central, less connected. The company basically shot itself in the foot, taking an immediate performance hit that was then amplified by damaging the internal network.
12% versus 5%. That's huge. It tells you managers have to be incredibly careful. The short-term gain from the program could be completely wiped out, or worse, by the long-term damage. If you remove someone who's key to that social fabric, that advice network we talked about, it really shows that procedural justice isn't just about following the rules. It's deeply tied to the social role of the person being affected.
It's the hidden cost, right? You fire a popular, helpful hub in the network, and you don't just lose that person's output. You damage morale, you disrupt advice flows for everyone else, and that can cascade into more performance problems down the line.
Okay, before we really nail down the managerial takeaways, let's just circle back quickly to the methods. For the academics listening, any concerns about hidden bias? How sure can we be these effects are real?
Very confident, actually. The researchers did what's called a Rosenbaum-Bounds sensitivity analysis. It's basically a robustness check. It asks, how strong would some unobserved factor, some hidden bias we didn't measure, need to be to completely explain away the results? And in this case, the finding was quite robust. That hidden variable would need to more than double the odds of a district being assigned to the bench program to invalidate the main finding. That's a high bar. So yeah, the causal link looks pretty solid.
Excellent. Good to know the rigor holds up. Okay, so let's boil it down. For a marketing leader, a sales VP, thinking about something like this, maybe not this exact program, but a tough disincentive, what are the absolute key takeaways?
I'd say three main things. First, on the plus side, the bench program kind of solves that classic manager problem, reluctance to fire. Because the replacements are already hired and trained, firing someone becomes operationally much easier. It decouples the dismissal decision from all those turnover costs, recruiting, training, leaving a territory open. It streamlines termination.
Okay, efficiency is a big plus, but the risks?
Absolutely. So takeaway number 2. Managing the fallout is critical. Risk mitigation is paramount. If you do end up having to fire someone, and that person is highly central, socially important, you must invest extra resources immediately. Reassure the survivors, shore up their sense of job security, reinforce perceptions of fairness. You simply cannot afford that massive 12 percentage point performance hit among the survivors if you handle it badly.
Got it. Mitigate the social damage. And the third takeaway?
Third, remember what you're actually buying with this kind of program. You're buying effort, mostly. It's an immediate performance boost driven by compliance working harder under threat. It's likely not a long-term shift in capability, not working smarter. The evidence, that immediate drop-off when the program stops, tells you the gains are probably temporary and highly dependent on the threat remaining active and vivid.
Okay, great summary. So just to recap the core findings. 1, a credible, vivid threat like the bench program can effectively motivate laggards. 2, vividness itself, that visible replacement, is a powerful addition to our understanding of deterrence. And 3, there's significant organizational risk tied to procedural justice and centrality if you end up removing key social players.
That nails it.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over. If we accept that the bench program's gains were mainly driven by compliance, by working harder due to fear, how could leaders design interventions that are similarly vivid, but also build in ways to encourage genuine capability development? Could you link the threat maybe to mandatory retraining or peer coaching with these bench players, something that pushes towards working smarter and makes those performance gains actually stick around?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How do you turn that short-term fear into long-term learning and improvement?
A challenge indeed. Well, this has been a fascinating look at the tougher side of sales management. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into disincentives and motivation. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for tuning into the Lion's Share podcast. If you enjoyed today's discussion, share it with a friend and join us next time for more ideas worth talking about. We'll see you next time.